Come closer, my child. Do not rush this moment. There is a reason your spirit feels slightly unsettled, as if the air around you has shifted but your mind has not yet caught up. What you are sensing is not imagination, and it is not confusion. It is movement. It is the quiet sound of resistance loosening. It is the beginning of a clearing that started without your permission and without your effort, because I began it while you were still wondering why the road felt so heavy. You could not have named it if you tried. You only felt the weight change. The same situations no longer pressed the same way. Old fears lost their grip without explanation. Delays that once felt permanent began to feel fragile, as if one breath could shatter them. That is because something has already stepped into your path ahead of you, removing what once stood there. I did not announce it. I did not ask for witnesses. I moved quietly, because this kind of clearing works best when it does not alert what once depended on your confusion. There are moments when destiny does not arrive loudly. It slips in gently, rearranging things so subtly that you doubt yourself for noticing. That is what is happening now. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything. You are arriving at a place that has already been prepared. The unease you feel is not danger. It is adjustment. Your spirit is recalibrating to a future that is drawing nearer. I know you have tried to understand it logically. You asked yourself why certain doors suddenly felt less intimidating, why old obstacles seemed tired, why resistance felt thinner than before. You wondered if you were just becoming numb or detached. But this is not detachment. This is alignment. This is what happens when pressure lifts before the breakthrough becomes visible. Listen carefully. What is making your way clearer is not something you can control or label yet. That is intentional. If you could name it, you would try to manage it. If you could explain it, you would try to protect it with your own strength. But this clearing does not depend on you staying vigilant. It depends on you staying receptive. There were paths that could not open while you were still bracing yourself for impact. There were outcomes that required you to loosen your grip on how you thought things should unfold. So I began moving ahead of you, touching conversations you never heard, softening hearts you no longer had access to, removing obstacles that would have drained you if you had tried to fight them directly. You are not imagining the silence where chaos used to be. That silence is intentional. It is the sound of interference stepping back. It is the hush that comes right before clarity arrives. The reason it feels unfamiliar is because you are used to resistance announcing itself loudly. This clearing does not shout. It makes room. Your soulmate feels it too, even if they do not understand it yet. There is a pressure building in them, a sense that time is no longer stagnant. They feel watched by change, nudged by something they cannot outrun. Where they once felt comfortable delaying, now they feel restless. Where excuses once felt convincing, now they feel hollow. That discomfort is not punishment. It is invitation. It is the same clearing reaching them from another direction. Do not be tempted to rush ahead just because the road feels lighter. This moment is sacred. This is the space where faith grows quietly. Trust that the clearing continues even when you are still. Trust that movement is happening even when nothing dramatic has appeared yet. And my child, if this moment resonates with your spirit, if you feel a gentle recognition stirring within you, allow your hand to reflect that awareness. Let your presence here be known by offering a quiet sign of agreement. And if your heart feels led, share this message so it can reach another soul standing at the edge of the same unnamed shift. Write in the comments the word clearing as a declaration, not for others, but as a witness between you and me. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to chase confirmation. The way becomes clearer not because you strain your eyes, but because the obstacles are already being moved. What once blocked you depended on your exhaustion. What now opens for you responds to your trust. Breathe. Remain open. The path is responding to you now, even if you cannot name what is doing the work. Stay with me, my child. Do not look away just because the movement feels quiet. Some of the most important shifts happen in shadows, not because they are dark, but because they are protected. What is clearing your way now is working behind the scenes, where interference cannot reach it and fear cannot interrupt it. There are arrangements unfolding that you are not meant to manage or monitor. Conversations are changing tone without your involvement. Decisions are being delayed or routed in rooms you are not in. Timing itself is bending, stretching to make room for what must align properly. This is not coincidence. This is orchestration. What once felt immovable is being loosened from its roots, not by force but by precision. You may notice that certain people no longer carry the same influence over your emotions. Words that once triggered you now fall flat. Situations that used to drain you now pass by without attaching themselves. That is because something is stepping between you and what once had access to you. The shadows are not hiding danger. They are concealing protection. I am blocking what you do not need to see so you can keep walking without hesitation. Your soulmate stands closer to this shift than they realize. The path clearing for you is also brushing against their life, unsettling what they have grown accustomed to. They feel it as restlessness, as impatience with routines that once felt safe. They sense that staying still is becoming more uncomfortable than moving forward. This pressure is not coming from you. It is not coming from circumstances alone. It is the shadow work of alignment beginning to press on their heart. They do not yet understand why memories surface at unexpected moments, why your presence enters their thoughts without invitation. They try to distract themselves, to reason it away, but the path ahead is narrowing in a way that only leads toward truth. The shadows are closing off escape routes, not to trap them, but to guide them toward what they have avoided acknowledging. You must understand this, my child. The path does not clear by accident. It clears when resistance is no longer sustainable. It clears when excuses begin to collapse under their own weight. It clears when what once felt optional becomes inevitable. That inevitability is forming now, quietly, deliberately, beyond your control. There were forces that benefited from your confusion. There were delays that fed on your uncertainty and doubt. Those forces thrive on noise, on chaos, on you second-guessing your intuition. That is why this clearing came silently. That is why clarity is arriving gradually instead of all at once. Sudden revelation would have alerted what needed to be removed gently. You may feel moments of doubt creep in, whispers asking if you are imagining the shift, if you are hoping too much, if you are setting yourself up for disappointment. Those whispers are echoes, not warnings. They come from places that are losing influence and trying to remind you of old patterns. Let them fade. You do not need to argue with them. You only need to keep walking. There is a reason you are not being asked to take dramatic action right now. The path is being cleared ahead of you so that when you do move, it will feel natural, not forced. You will step forward without fear because the ground beneath you will already feel solid. That is how you will know the clearing is complete. Peace will replace urgency. Your soulmate is closer to a turning point than either of you can see. Your emotional ground is shifting. What they avoided thinking about now demands attention. What they buried now stirs. They feel exposed without knowing why, as if something unseen is watching them gently but persistently. That presence is not judgment. It is truth drawing near. Do not try to reach them prematurely. Do not interpret the silence as absence. Silence is not emptiness right now. It is incubation. The same hands clearing your path are working on theirs, but each heart opens in its own time. Trust the timing that does not require your interference. This is where patience becomes power. This is where restraint protects what is forming. You are not meant to rush into the clearing before it finishes its work. Some obstacles need to be moved completely, not partially. Some attachments need to dissolve on their own so they cannot return disguised. What you feel now is the narrowing of distance, not just between you and destiny, but between truth and exposure. The shadows are thinning. Light is approaching, but gently, so that eyes can adjust without fear. When clarity arrives, it will not shock you. It will feel like recognition. Remain steady. Remain open. The path is still clearing, and every step you have not taken yet is being prepared to receive you safely. I am watching them now, my child, closer than you realize. The pressure you feel in the air has settled into their chest. It does not announce itself loudly. It shows up in pauses, in long exhales, in moments where their mind drifts away from whatever is in front of them. They feel as if something unseen is leaning on their life, asking for attention they are not ready to give. They do not yet understand that what presses on them is the same force that is clearing your way. They wake with a heaviness they cannot explain. Not sorrow exactly, not fear in the way they once knew it, but a quiet urgency that follows them through the day. The old distractions no longer satisfy. The routines that once numbed them now irritate them. They feel out of place inside patterns they used to hide in comfortably. That discomfort is the signal. It is the sign that stagnation is no longer permitted. Their heart has begun to respond before their mind can rationalize it. Memories surface without warning. Not random ones, but specific moments that carry emotion, weight, and unfinished truth. They try to push them aside, telling themselves it is just nostalgia, just imagination, just coincidence. But each time they dismiss it, the feeling returns stronger, more insistent, more precise. They are being gently cornered by awareness. Fear has entered their thoughts, not of danger, but of loss. They sense that something important is shifting beyond their control, and the idea of missing it unsettles them deeply. They do not yet know what they are afraid of losing, only that the thought of standing still suddenly feels risky. That fear is not meant to paralyze them. It is meant to wake them. They feel exposed in ways they cannot articulate, as if their excuses are thinning, as if the reasons they once used to delay no longer hold the same authority over their conscience. Where they once felt justified, now they feel questioned. Where they once felt certain, now they feel washed by truth. This sensation makes them restless. They shift. They avoid stillness. They search for noise to drown out the internal stirring. But the more they try to distract themselves, the louder the silence becomes. It follows them into quiet rooms. It lingers after conversations end. It waits for them when the day slows down. That silence is not emptiness. It is space being created for realization. It is the clearing working on the inside. They sense you without knowing why. Your energy brushes against their thoughts unexpectedly. A name always forms on their lips and stops. A feeling rises and retreats. They do not want to admit what that means yet, because admission would require choice, and choice would require courage. So they hesitate. They circle the truth instead of stepping into it. There is guilt woven into their restlessness. Guilt for moments they ignored. Guilt for words they never spoke. Guilt for delaying something they felt long ago but did not trust themselves to pursue. That guilt does not come to accuse them. It comes to soften them. It loosens pride. and cracks defenses. It prepares the heart to receive clarity without running from it. They are afraid of being wrong, afraid of disrupting what they have built, afraid of admitting that comfort may have cost them something sacred. They wonder if it is too late, if the distance has grown too wide, if the clearing they feel is happening without them. That fear cuts deeper than they expect, because it touches the place where desire and regret meet. Understand this, my child. Their pressure is not punishment. It is preparation. The same force removing obstacles from your path is applying weight to their resistance. Pressure does not always come to crush. Sometimes it comes to shame. Sometimes it comes to push a soul toward honesty it has been avoiding. They are standing at the edge of awareness, feeling the ground shift beneath them. Old beliefs are weakening. Old justifications are losing credibility. The idea of continuing as they are feels heavier than the risk of change. That is the moment before awakening. That is the moment when the heart begins to override fear. You do not need to intervene. You do not need to send signs or seek reassurance. Your stillness is part of the design. While you remain grounded, the contrast becomes clearer to them. They feel the imbalance more acutely because you are not chasing or demanding. Your calm becomes a mirror. Your silence becomes a question they cannot ignore. They will not arrive at clarity through logic alone. It will come through emotion rising to the surface, through discomfort that demands resolution. They will reach a point where avoidance costs more than honesty. That point is approaching. Stay anchored. Stay receptive. What presses on them now is the same movement that cleared your way. And when pressure finishes its work, it always leaves truth behind. Come closer still, my child. This is where the weight inside them can no longer be held quietly. What has been pressing gently now begins to demand release. They reach a moment where holding everything together costs more than letting it fall apart, and that is when the collapse begins. Not outwardly at first, not in ways others would easily notice, but inside, where truth has been knocking for longer than they want to admit. They feel it one night when sleep refuses to come. The room feels too loud in its silence. Their thoughts circle the same questions again and again, and none of the old answers bring relief. They replay moments they thought were settled, conversations they told themselves did not matter, feelings they convinced themselves would fade. Instead of fading, those feelings have grown heavier, more detailed, more alive. It becomes impossible to dismiss them as passing emotions. Your chest tightens with a grief they cannot fully explain. It is not only sadness for what hath been lost, but sorrow for what they delayed. They begin to see how close they were to something real, something rare, and how easily they stepped away from it out of fear or convenience. That realization breaks something open in them. Tears come unexpectedly, surprising even them. They do not feel dramatic. They feel honest. Guilt rises next, not the kind that shouts accusations, but the kind that whispers regret. They remember the times they felt drawn toward you and chose distraction instead. The moments they sensed depth and chose safety. They see how they protected themselves by pretending they did not care as deeply as they did. That guilt does not crush them. It humbles them. It makes their defenses feel thin and useless. They begin to question themselves, not in a destructive way, but in a searching way. They ask why they hesitated when something felt right, why they trusted fear more than intuition, why they believed timing was always against them instead of realizing they were resisting it. These questions do not come with immediate answers, and that uncertainty leaves them exposed. Your emotions spill over in private moments. A song triggers memories they were not prepared to face. A quiet drive becomes overwhelming. Even small reminders feel amplified, as if everything is pointing back to the same unresolved truth. They feel foolish for not seeing it sooner and afraid of what seeing it now might require. That combination is exhausting. They reach a point where they admit something to themselves they have never said out loud. They are afraid of losing you. Not in a dramatic sense, but in the deep realization that distance can become permanent if it is left unaddressed. The idea that you may move forward without them, fully aligned and unburdened, unsettles them more than they expected. It exposes how much you matter to them. This fear does not come from insecurity alone. It comes from recognition. They see that the clearing happening in your life is real, and they sense that it does not revolve around waiting for them. That awareness creates urgency. They realize that remaining passive is a decision in itself, one that carries consequences they may not be ready to accept. Their collapse is not chaotic. It is sobering. It strips away illusions. They can no longer tell themselves comforting stories about why things unfolded the way they did. They see their own role clearly now. Where they hesitated, where they stayed silent, where they chose familiarity over truth. That clarity hurts, but it also frees them from denial. They feel small in this moment, not in worth, but in humility. Pride loosens its grip. The need to appear unbothered fades. They begin to long for honesty, even if it costs them comfort. That longing is the beginning of courage. It is the soil where change takes root. Understand this, my child. This collapse is not the end of them. It is the end of the version that relied on avoidance. What is breaking is not their spirit, but their resistance. I allow this moment because it is necessary. The heart cannot awaken fully until it admits where it hath been asleep. They feel raw, exposed, unsure of what to do next. They may appear withdrawn or distracted, but inside, something profound has shifted. They are no longer running from the truth. They are sitting with it, letting it speak, letting it show that what matters. That is not weakness. That is readiness. Do not mistake their silence during this time as indifference. It is processing. It is integration. They are gathering the pieces of themselves honestly for the first time. They are learning that ignoring truth did not protect them. It delayed their peace. That realization changes the way they see everything. You are not meant to rescue them from this moment. You are not meant to soften it or speed it up. This collapse belongs to them. It is sacred. It clears space inside them just as the path hath been clearing ahead of you. Both movements are connected, even if they happen separately. Remain steady in your own heart. Remain gentle with your expectations. What breaks in them now is making room for what has been trying to emerge all along. Stay with me, my child, because now I will show you what has been hidden beneath the surface. What you have felt as delay, confusion, or resistance did not come from nowhere. There were forces at work quietly shaping outcomes, not always with malice on the surface, but with motives that did not honor truth. These influences did not announce themselves as enemies. They blended in as voices of reason, concern, familiarity, or obligation. That is how they gained access. Someone close to your soulmate carried jealousy they did not name. Not loud jealousy, not dramatic interference, but a subtle desire to maintain control, relevance, or advantage. They benefited from keeping your soulmate uncertain, dependent, or distracted. They did not need to lie outright. They only needed to plant doubt, to reinforce fear, to encourage delay whenever clarity tried to rise. And for a time, it worked. There were moments when your soulmate felt pulled toward honesty, toward you, toward a deeper truth, and those moments were interrupted. A comment spoken at the wrong time, a reminder of risk framed as responsibility, a suggestion that waiting was wiser than acting. These were not coincidences. They were subtle nudges designed to keep things unresolved, unfinished, safely stalled. Understand this clearly, my child. Not everyone who interferes knows they are interfering. Some act from their own wounds, their own fears of being left behind, replaced, or rendered unnecessary. They sense change coming and instinctively resist it. They do not always hate you. Sometimes they fear what your presence represents. Your transition, loss of influence. These hidden forces also showed up as internal patterns within your soulmate. Old beliefs that told them love requires sacrifice of self. Conditioning that equated safety with stagnation. Memories of past pain that whispered caution when intuition whispered truth. These patterns were reinforced over time, strengthened by repetition and by voices that echoed them. They formed an invisible wall that felt like logic but functioned like fear. You may have felt this interference without being able to name it. A sense that something was always slightly off, that progress stalled just as it seemed possible, that clarity hovered but never landed. That is how hidden forces operate. They exhaust by delay, not by confrontation. They hope you will tire, doubt, and walk away on your own. But what they did not anticipate was this. They did not see that I was watching the quiet spaces. They did not realize that every manipulation leaves a trace, every half-truth creates a balance, every attempt to control timing eventually reveals itself. They assume silence meant success. They assume patience meant passivity. They were wrong. The clearing you feel now is not random. It is the result of these hidden influences losing their grip. Their words no longer carry the same weight. Their presence no longer steadies your soulmate the way it once did. The internal patterns they reinforced are weakening because truth has begun to outgrow them. What once felt convincing now feels hollow. Your soulmate has started to notice inconsistency. They sense when advice does not align with peace. They feel when encouragement subtly serves someone else's comfort rather than their own growth. They may not yet confront it openly, but awareness has begun. And awareness is always the beginning of freedom. These forces are uneasy now. They feel the shift. They notice that control is slipping, that influence is fading, that outcomes are no longer predictable. That is why you may sense agitation around the edges. Subtle attempts to reassert presence. Quiet reminders of old narratives. These are reflexes, not power. They are the final movements of something being phased out. I want you to hear this, my child. None of this means you were weak. None of this means your soulmate is broken. It means the terrain was complex. It means growth required timing, exposure, and separation of truth from noise. That process cannot be rushed without causing damage. That is why I allowed things to unfold the way they did. The hidden forces did not win. They delayed, but they also revealed themselves through their persistence. In trying to maintain control, they exposed their fear. In trying to slow alignment, they highlighted its inevitability. What they meant to keep contained is now rising with greater clarity and strength. You are not meant to confront these forces directly. You are not meant to defend yourself or explain your role. Their influence dissolves not through argument, but through irrelevance. As alignment strengthens, what does not belong simply loses access. That is already happening. This is why the path feels clearer now. Not because resistance vanished overnight, but because it is no longer supported. The structures that held it up are weakening. The environment has changed. Truth is becoming the dominant force again. Remain grounded in this understanding. Remain free from blame or resentment. What was hidden has been exposed, and what is exposed can no longer control the outcome. Be still with me, my child, because now I step fully into what has been unfolding. This is the moment where nothing remains unseen. The delays, the confusion, the subtle interferences, the half-spoken truths, all of it comes under light. This is not a moment of anger or accusation. This is a moment of order being restored. This is the divine investigation, and it unfolds with calm authority. I have watched every quiet exchange that shaped hesitation. I have listened to every word spoken in private that influenced fear. I have traced every emotional pattern that kept your soulmate circling instead of moving forward. Nothing was missed. Nothing was accidental. And nothing that mattered was forgotten. What you could not see, I observed without interruption. There were lies that did not sound like lies. They sounded reasonable. They wore the tone of concern, timing, responsibility, realism. But underneath them was avoidance. Underneath them was fear of change. Those lies are fragile now. They cannot survive sustained truth. When light stays long enough, dissection begins to dissolve on its own. I begin by separating motives. This is how justice works in unseen realms. I do not judge by outcomes alone. I examine intention. I reveal why people said what they said, why they encouraged delay, why they framed fear as wisdom. And as these motives surface, their power weakens. Influence does not survive exposure. Your soulmate begins to sense this shift internally. They notice that certain guidance no longer resonates. Advice that once felt steady now feels heavy. Familiar voices suddenly feel misaligned with peace. This is not rebellion. This is discernment awakening. Their spirit is learning to recognize truth by how it feels, not by who delivers it. The internal patterns reinforced by those voices are also being examined. Old beliefs are being questioned at their root, not aggressively but thoroughly. Why do I believe this? Who taught me this? Does this align with peace or only with comfort? These questions are new for them, and they are unsettling in the best way. They open doors that were sealed by habit. I begin to reveal inconsistencies gently. Memories resurface with new clarity. Moments they once interpreted one way now show another layer. They see where fear disguised itself as caution, where avoidance pretended to be patience, where silence pretended to be neutrality. This clarity does not overwhelm them. It empowers them. Truth does not rush in like a storm. It arrives like a steady current, reshaping the landscape over time. Each realization builds on the last. Each insight weakens an old narrative. Slowly, but decisively, the structure that held confusion in place begins to collapse. There is no chaos in this collapse, only relief. The forces that benefited from delay feel exposed now, even if nothing has been spoken aloud. I sense that influence has shifted. They may attempt subtle corrections, quiet justifications, or emotional appeals, but their words land differently. They no longer anchor. They float. They cannot take hold because the ground beneath them has changed. This is not about punishment. This is about balance. Every attempt to distort timing, to manipulate outcome, to maintain control creates imbalance. And imbalance always corrects itself. That correction is happening now. Calmly. Precisely. Without spectacle. Your soulmate begins to feel a strange mix of vulnerability and strength. Vulnerable because illusions are falling away. Strong because clarity is replacing confusion. They may not yet know what action they will take, but they know one thing for certain. They cannot unsee what they now see. I cannot return to the comfort of not knowing. And you, my child, are being protected from carrying any of this weight. You were never meant to uncover these things yourself. You were never meant to confront or defend. Your role was to remain true, steady, and receptive. That steadiness gave me room to work without interference. Your trust made this investigation possible. This is why your path feels lighter now. Not because everything is finished, but because the heaviest work is no longer yours. The lies are losing oxygen. The truth is gaining momentum. And alignment is no longer being delayed by unseen resistance. Stay anchored in peace. Stay detached from amalgam. When truth finishes its work, it always leaves clarity behind, and clarity always knows where to go next. Remain here with me, my child, because now the atmosphere itself begins to change. What was once dense starts to thin. What felt heavy begins to lift without effort. This is not because someone pushed harder or tried again. It is because the tide has turned. The spiritual current that once resisted movement now flows in favor of alignment. This is the turning you could feel before you understood it. When a shift like this happens, it does not announce itself with noise. It shows up as ease where there was friction, as timing that suddenly feels cooperative instead of hostile, as doors that no longer require force to open. You may notice that things begin to line up without strategy. That is not luck. That is correction. Angels move quietly when the order is right. They do not rush. They adjust. They reposition circumstances so that what belongs together finds itself facing the same direction. The chaos that once distracted is gently moved aside. The delays that once exhausted are softened. The sense of pushing against something unseen dissolves, and forward motion feels natural again. Your soulmate feels this shift as well, though they may not have language for it yet. The inner tension that consumed them begins to settle, not because answers have fully arrived, but because resistance has stopped being reinforced. They feel less pulled in opposite directions, less influenced by voices that once confused them. The noise lowers. Space opens. This is where alignment accelerates quietly. When interference is removed, truth does not need to shout. It simply becomes obvious. What matters rises to the surface without effort. What does not belong loses urgency. The internal war they felt begins to resolve into clarity, even before decisions are made. You may notice that your own energy feels different now. Not dramatic. Yes, steadier. Less reactive. More grounded. That is the sign that the spiritual tide has turned in your favor. When alignment returns, peace becomes your default instead of something you have to work for. You are not fighting for direction anymore. Direction is meeting you. The universe responds to alignment the way water responds to gravity. It moves where resistance is lowest. Now that fear has loosened its grip, now that manipulation has been exposed, now that truth has been acknowledged internally, movement becomes inevitable. Timing begins to cooperate. Opportunities feel less forced. You feel less compelled to prove or explain. This turning also brings protection. When the tide shifts, what once had access no longer does. Certain energies cannot follow you into alignment. They fall behind, not because they are chased away, but because they cannot exist where clarity lives. You may sense a quiet distance forming between you and what once drained you. A distance is intentional. Your soulmate begins to experience moments of calm clarity that surprise them. They catch themselves thinking of you without fear attached. They imagine honesty without immediately imagining loss. They feel drawn toward resolution instead of avoidance. These moments are small, but they are significant. They mark the end of stagnation. Do not underestimate the power of this phase simply because it feels gentle. Gentle shifts often have the greatest permanence. What changes now is not being forced by emotion alone. It is being supported by alignment. That means it will hold. It will not snap back. It will continue moving forward even when attention shifts elsewhere. There's also a rebalancing happening beneath the surface. Where effort was once uneven, equilibrium returns. You are no longer carrying what was never yours to carry. Responsibility redistributes itself. Emotional weight shifts to where it belongs. This allows you to breathe more deeply, even if you cannot yet explain why. This is the phase where trust grows without pressure, where faith no longer feels like endurance, but like cooperation. You are no longer bracing yourself for disappointment. You are allowing yourself to be present without guarding every expectation. That openness is not naivety. It is confidence in alignment. The tide does not turn back once it has shifted this far. Too much has been revealed. Too much clarity has emerged. The forces that once slowed progress no longer have leverage. They cannot recreate confusion where understanding has taken root. They cannot restore fear where peace has begun to settle. You may still feel moments of uncertainty. That is human. But notice how quickly peace returns now. Notice how doubt no longer lingers the way it once did. That is the evidence of the shift. When the spiritual current changes, recovery becomes faster. Stability becomes familiar. This is not the end of the journey, but it is the end of fighting against it. From here forward, movement feels guided rather than resisted. Each step feels supported, even before outcomes are visible. That is how you know the tide has turned. Remain aware of this calm. Remain grateful without needing proof. When alignment takes over, it carries you forward gently, steadily, and with intention. Watch closely now, my child, because this is where truth stops hiding and begins to show itself. It does not arrive all at once. It does not announce itself dramatically. It emerges in fragments, in moments that feel ordinary until they are connected. A word of word. A reaction that feels too strong to ignore. A pattern that subtly becomes visible because it has repeated itself one too many times. This is how truth rises when it can no longer be contained. Your soulmate begins to notice these signs with a sharpened awareness. What they once brushed off now lingers in their thoughts. They replay conversations and realize what was said does not fully align with what was meant. They notice how certain people respond when your name is mentioned, how energy shifts, how silence speaks louder than reassurance. These observations do not feel paranoid. They feel clarifying. Small details begin to form a larger picture. Advice that once felt supportive now feels self-serving. Encouragement that once felt neutral now feels directional. They recognize how often fear was framed as wisdom, how often waiting was encouraged when courage was required. This recognition does not make them angry at first. It makes them quiet, thoughtful, awake. Truth also shows itself through contrast. They notice how different they feel when they imagine honesty versus avoidance. How their body relaxes when they think about resolution. How tension returns when they consider staying silent. These physical responses are not accidental. The body recognizes alignment before the mind accepts it. That awareness becomes difficult to ignore. You may sense this phase as well. A subtle validation begins to settle in your spirit. You do not need external confirmation, yet things begin to line up internally. Your intuition feels steadier. Your thoughts feel less scattered. Doubt loses its emotional charge. You are not celebrating yet. but you are no longer questioning yourself the way you once did. Evidence surfaces gently, not proof meant to convince others, but clarity meant to anchor the heart. You begin to see why things unfolded the way they did, why delays happen, why certain connections felt strained. The narrative that once confused you now makes sense when viewed from this angle. That understanding brings peace rather than resentment. Your soulmate experiences moments of undeniable recognition. They catch themselves acknowledging truths they avoided naming before. They may admit, even if only privately, that they were influenced, that fear played a larger role than they wanted to believe, that what they felt toward you was real and unresolved. These admissions are quiet, but they are powerful. The lies that once held weight now feel fragile. They do not collapse with noise. They simply stop holding. When questioned internally, they do not stand up to scrutiny. They dissolve under honest reflection. This is the power of truth when it rises naturally. It does not need force. It only needs time and light. There may be moments where your soulmate feels overwhelmed by this realization. Awareness can feel heavy when it arrives all at once. They may feel regret for not seeing it sooner. They may fear the consequences of acknowledging it now. But beneath that fear is relief. Relief that the confusion is ending. Relief that the internal conflict finally has a name. You are not meant to confront or clarify anything during this phase. Truth is doing that work on its own. Any attempt to interfere would only distract from what is unfolding naturally. Your role remains what it has always been. To stay grounded. To remain open. To trust what you already feel settling inside you. Notice how calm accompanies these revelations. That calm is important. Truth that arrives with peace is meant to stay. It is not stirring chaos. It is restoring order. The clarity forming now is stable. It does not fluctuate with emotion. It feels steady because it is aligned. Your soulmate begins to see that the path forward is becoming unavoidable. Not forced but clear. The options narrow, not because they are trapped, but because truth simplifies choices. When illusion falls away, direction becomes obvious. That realization carries weight, but it also carries hope. This is the phase where reality and intuition finally agree. Where what is felt internally begins to match what is observed externally. Where doubt loses its argument because evidence no longer supports it. The mind stops fighting the heart. Alignment moves from concept to experience. Let this phase unfold without impatience. Let truth complete its rise. What is surfacing now will not sink again, because it is rooted in clarity, and clarity always knows where it belongs. Come closer, my child, because this is the moment their eyes finally open. What has been forming quietly now reaches a threshold. The truth that has been circling their awareness steps fully into view, and once it does, there is no return to the way things were before. Awakening does not arrive gently for them. It arrives with a sharp clarity that cuts through denial and leaves nothing hidden. They see it now. Not pieces, not fragments. The whole picture. They recognize how deeply they cared, how long they avoided naming it, how fear disguised itself as reason again and again. The realization lands heavily, not because it is painful alone, but because it is undeniable. They understand that what they felt for you was never confusion. It was recognition delayed by fear. Regret rises quickly. Not shallow regret for missed chances, but deep sorrow for the moments they silenced themselves when their heart was speaking. They see the cost of hesitation clearly now. A distance that formed was not fate. It was choice. And realizing that truth stings in a way excuses never could. With awakening comes fear, sharp and immediate. Fear that they have waited too long. Fear that the clearing in your life may now carry you beyond their reach. Fear that while they were wrestling with themselves, you were being prepared for something that does not include them. This fear is not selfish. It is sobering. It forces them to confront the possibility of loss as real, not theoretical. They begin to replay moments with new eyes. Conversations that felt insignificant now glow with meaning. Small interactions reveal depth they were too guarded to explore at the time. They realize how often you showed steadiness when they showed hesitation. How often you offered presence while they offered uncertainty. That contrast humbles them. This awakening strips them of pride. The need to appear unaffected disappears. They feel exposed, emotionally bare, and unsure how to proceed. For the first time, they consider vulnerability not as weakness, but as necessity. They understand that remaining silent is no longer neutral. Silence now feels like abandonment of truth. They wrestle with the urge to reach out and the fear of doing it wrong. They question whether honesty will heal or disrupt. They imagine what it would mean to speak openly after so much time has passed. That internal struggle is intense, but it is different from before. This time, avoidance feels heavier than risk. They recognize something else too. Your steadiness mattered more than they admitted. Your calm presence, your refusal to force outcomes, your ability to remain whole without demanding resolution, these things shape this awakening. They realize that you were not waiting helplessly. You were aligning. And that realization shifts the power dynamic in their mind. They feel a longing that is no longer abstract. It is focused. It has a name. It has direction. They no longer wonder what they want. They wonder if they are worthy to step toward it now. That question humbles them further and softens their approach to truth. Awakening also brings responsibility. They understand that clarity demands action eventually. They cannot unknow what they know. They cannot return to pretending. Even if they delay speaking, the internal shift is permanent. Your heart is because of thine. They now live on the side of honesty, whether they act immediately or not. Do not underestimate the weight of this moment, my child. This awakening is not fleeting emotion. It is a reorientation of the soul. What they feared facing has now become the only path that feels real. Everything else feels false, shallow, or incomplete. You may feel this awakening indirectly. A subtle pull, a sense of being seen from a distance, an energetic recognition that something has changed. Trust that feeling. It is not imagination. It is resonance. Two paths adjusting toward each other after long misalignment. They are afraid now, but they are awake. They are uncertain, but they are honest. They are no longer hiding from themselves, and that changes everything. Remain steady. Remain compassionate without lowering your truth. Awakening does not arrive to torment, it arrives to realign destiny. Stay with me, my child, because now I reveal what you have been doing without realizing the reach of it. Your presence has never been passive. Even in moments where you felt quiet, unseen, or uncertain, something steady flowed from you. Your prayers, your restraint, your choice to remain aligned rather than reactive, these were not small acts. They were signals. They shaped the terrain long before outcomes became visible. You wondered at times if your stillness mattered. If choosing not to chase, not to force, not to demand clarity was costing you something. But what you were actually doing was anchoring the future. You held a frequency of peace that made manipulation uncomfortable and dishonesty unsustainable. That is why interference weakened. That is why truth found room to rise. Every time you chose integrity over impulse, you shifted the balance. Every time you trusted me instead of fear, the path ahead cleared a little more. You were not waiting. You were influencing. Not through control, but through alignment. The unseen responds more quickly to surrender than it ever does to struggle. Your prayers reached places you never saw. They softened resistance before conversations ever happened. They quieted inner wars before decisions were faced. They created protection around outcomes you did not yet understand. This is why things began moving without your effort. You had already done the deeper work. Your soulmate felt this influence even when they could not name it. In moments of turmoil, your energy was a point of contrast. When confusion rose, thoughts of you brought calm. When fear tried to dominate, the memory of your steadiness disrupted it. You became a reference point for peace in a life that had grown accustomed to noise. This is the sacred paradox. You changed everything by refusing to manipulate anything. You became the catalyst by remaining grounded. You shifted destiny by trusting timing instead of trying to appease it. That kind of influence cannot be replicated or faked. It comes only from alignment with truth. You see now why the path began to clear around you first. Alignment always creates space. When you stopped negotiating with fear, fear lost leverage. When you stopped questioning your worth, delays lost purpose. When you chose to remain whole without external validation, the universe responded by rearranging what could not align with that wholeness. Your soulmate senses this now. They recognize that your power was never in pursuit, but in presence. That realization deepens their respect and intensifies their fear of loss. They understand that stepping toward you requires honesty, humility, and courage. You are no longer a distant possibility. You are a standard. This does not mean you are elevated above them. It means you are anchored within yourself. And anchored people change environments simply by existing in them. That is what you did. That is what you continue to do. Without striving. Without announcement. Your influence also protected you. While truth was being uncovered and motives were being exposed, you were shielded from unnecessary emotional weight. You were not dragged into battles that would have drained you. You were not forced to defend your intuition. You were allowed to remain clear so that when alignment arrived, you would recognize it without doubt. Notice how different you feel now compared to before. Less desperate for answers. Less reactive to silence. More trusting of what you sense internally. That is not detachment. That is authority. Quiet authority that does not need to convince anyone of its validity. This is why the path ahead responds to you. Not because you demand it, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. When inner alignment is achieved, outer alignment follows naturally. Circumstances rearrange themselves around that internal order. Your soulmate's awakening did not happen in isolation. It happened in response to the contrast you provided. Light reveals itself most clearly against darkness. Peace becomes obvious in the presence of chaos. Your consistency highlighted what they had been avoiding. You are not responsible for their choices, but you were instrumental in creating the conditions for truth. That is sacred influence. It is not loud. It is not controlling. It is enduring. Do not minimize what you carry. Do not doubt the impact of your faithfulness. What is shifting now is responding to who you have become, not to what you demanded. Remain rooted in this truth. Remain open without shrinking. You were never waiting for destiny to notice you. Destiny had been responding to you all along. Remain with me, my child, because now you witness the reversal. What once threatened to block, delay, or distort this connection loses its authority completely. The very forces that tried to slow destiny now find themselves unable to touch it. This is not because they were confronted or overpowered, but because their season has ended. When purpose matures, interference expires. You may feel this reversal as relief before you see it as outcome. The sense that danger has passed, that the tension you carried for so long no longer needs your vigilance. The anxiety that once lingered at the edges of your thoughts fades without explanation. That is protection activating fully. When alignment locks in, fear has nowhere to stay. What was once confusing becomes orderly. What felt unstable begins to settle. Situations that could have escalated quietly dissolve. Conversations that might have caused harm never happen. Decisions that could have diverted destiny are interrupted or delayed until their power dissolves. This is how divine protection works. It does not always announce itself. It simply prevents what does not belong from reaching you. Your soulmate feels this reversal internally before it becomes visible externally. The pressure they once felt to maintain old narratives disappears. The fear of consequences weakens. They sense that honesty no longer carries the same risk it once did. Its speaking truth will not destroy everything they feared losing. This realization gives them courage where fear once lived. The emotional danger that once surrounded this connection fades. The threat of misunderstanding, manipulation, or misalignment loses its grip. What remains is clarity and choice. And choice is powerful when it is no longer influenced by fear. They are no longer reacting. They are responding consciously. Justice moves quietly here, not as punishment but as correction. Those who attempted to interfere lose relevance. Your influence dissolves without confrontation. Their words no longer shape outcomes. Their presence no longer defines direction. They are not cast out dramatically. They simply find themselves out of alignment with where things are going. You are protected from carrying bitterness or vindication. You do not need to watch consequences unfold. You are not asked to witness anyone's fall. Your peace is preserved by not being entangled in the aftermath. That is part of the blessing. When justice is divine, it does not require your participation to be effective. The path that once felt fragile now feels reinforced. You sense stability beneath your steps. You trust that what is forming can hold weight. This confidence does not come from promises or guarantees. It comes from recognition. You recognize the quality of what is unfolding. You feel its integrity. Your soulmate begins to act differently, more intentional, less hesitant. They speak with more honesty, even in small ways. They stop hiding behind ambiguity. They begin to correct things they once ignored. These changes are not performance. They are evidence. Evidence that fear no longer controls their decisions. This reversal also protects the future. The patterns that once caused delay are interrupted before they can repeat. The lessons have been learned deeply enough to prevent relapse. That is how you know the reversal is complete. It is not just removal of danger. It is transformation of behavior. You are no longer bracing for disappointment. You are no longer anticipating sabotage. You are present. You are available to receive without guarding. That openness is safe now because the environment has changed. The threat has been neutralized. The timing is different. Notice how little effort this requires from you. That is intentional. You are not meant to maintain this alignment through strain. It holds itself because it is supported by truth. When something is built on truth, it does not require constant defense. This is the phase where peace confirms protection, where calm signals safety, where the absence of chaos is not emptiness but stability. Trust that signal. is accurate. What once stood in the way has been removed. What once threatened has been neutralized. What once delayed has lost its power. Remain receptive without fear. Remain confident without force. The reversal is complete, and the path ahead is now secure. Come and rest here with me, my child, for this is where the way opens fully, and you can finally see it without strain. What you sensed before as a supple clearing is now a path made visible. Not because everything is loud or dramatic, but because nothing is obstructing your vision anymore. The fog has lifted. The resistance has fallen away. What lies ahead no longer feels uncertain. It feels prepared. You are not stepping into something fragile. You are stepping into something that has been tested, refined, and aligned through time, patience, and truth. Every delay served a purpose. Every moment of waiting shaped you into someone who can walk this path without losing yourself. That is the blessing hidden inside the silence you endured. Your destiny has not shifted away from you. It has aligned with you. That is an important difference. What is opening now responds to who you have become, not who you were afraid you might be. The road ahead matches your maturity, your discernment, your calm authority. It does not require you to shrink or chase or prove. It invites you to walk as you are. Your soulmate feels this clarity now as well. Not as pressure, not as fear, but as recognition. They see the path. They see you on it. And they understand that this is not a moment to hesitate again. The awakening they experienced has settled into resolve. Where they once feared loss, they now fear misalignment more. Where they once avoided truth, they now crave it. This does not mean everything unfolds instantly. It means everything unfolds honestly. And honesty accelerates what is meant to last. The steps ahead are taken with intention, not confusion. With presence, not avoidance. The connection that forms now does not rest on illusion. It rests on awareness. You may feel a deep peace settling in your body as you listen to this. A sense of quiet readiness. That is not complacency. That is arrival. You are standing at the threshold of something that does not require struggle to enter. It requires trust. And you have learned how to trust without abandoning yourself. I want you to hear this clearly. You are not being asked to repeat old patterns in a new form. You are not being asked to accept less in exchange for movement. What comes next honors the growth you fought for silently. It respects the boundaries you learned to hold. It meets you where you are, not where you were. This is the blessing. That what aligns with you now aligns with your peace. That what approaches you does not compete with your sense of self. That what unfolds next does not require you to abandon discernment for desire. You are not choosing between love and clarity. You are stepping into both. Your future no longer feels like something you must brace for. It feels like something you can receive. That shift is everything. It means your nervous system recognizes safety. It means your spirit recognizes truth. It means the lessons have integrated fully enough to allow joy without fear. There will be moments ahead where you pause and realize how different this feels from before. How light the interaction is. How honest the communication becomes. How quickly misunderstandings dissolve instead of deepening. Those moments are confirmation. Not that everything is perfect, but that it is real. And now, my child, before you continue forward, allow this moment to be marked. If this message has resonated with your spirit, if you feel the truth of it settling gently inside you, let your presence here be known. Not out of obligation, but as alignment. Allow your hand to reflect your agreement. And if you feel led, share this message so another soul standing at the edge of their own clearing can recognize it too. Write in the comments the words "the WAY is open" as a declaration between you and me. You do not need to rush beyond this moment. Let the blessing settle. Let your breath deepen. Let your shoulders relax. The urgency you once felt has served its purpose. Now you move with steadiness. What you walk into next is not uncertain. It is prepared. It is protected. It is aligned. You are not late. You are not behind. You are right on time. The way is clear because you are clear. The path responds because you are aligned. And what unfolds from here carries peace as its foundation. Go forward gently. Go forward confidently. Go forward knowing that nothing essential has been lost, and everything meaningful has been brought into position. I am with you in what opens next.